Finance-Auditing Committee meeting of June 25th, 2020.
Thank you. Director Cochran.
Here.
Present. Director Grosboll.
Here.
Thank you. Present. Director Moylan.
Here.
Present. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks.
Here.
Present. Chair Sobel.
Here.
Present. And President Farr.
Yes.
Thank you. You have a quorum and you are not a committee of the whole. There are 3 other directors on the line. That's Director Hill, Director Maston, and Director Chirio. So you have 9 members.
All right.
I'm going to move on to staff. Dennis Mulligan, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Auditor Controller Joe Wire, are you on the line?
Yes.
Thank you. Chief Engineer Ava Bauer, are you on the line?
Here.
Thank you. Attorney Kim Manolius, are you on the line?
Yes, Emrat, I'm here. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy General Manager of the Bridge Division, Steve Miller.
I'm here, Emrat. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy General Manager of the Bus Division, Mona Badabauta, are you on the line?
Yes, present.
Thank you. And DGM of the Ferry Division, Jim Swindler, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And DGM of the A&D Division, Kelly Hopper, are you on the line?
Present.
Thank you. And that confirms all the staff on the line.
Very good. First thing I'd like to do is to remind everyone to mute their phones, if you would, until after staff's presentations, and we open up the line for directors' discussion. If there are questions, as we all know, the Secretary will call on you. After the director's discussion, we will ask for public comment before taking a roll call vote. So each page of the meeting packet is numbered on the bottom right-hand corner for ease of following along. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the first item?
Thank you, Chair Sobel. Item number 3 is ratification of previous actions by the Auditor Controller. The packet of commitments, ratification, and investments is before you and begins on page 5. Leslie Murphy is on the line to provide her report. Ms. Murphy, please begin your presentation.
Good morning.
Good
morning, everyone. Good morning. Glad to be speaking with you all again. My apologies, my voice is a little scratchy today. I seem to have picked up a little bit of a cold. Nonetheless, we are ready to power through. So let's start, as usual, with a look at U.S. Treasury yields on page 10 of your agenda packet. Not surprisingly, the yields on U.S. Treasury obligations remained extremely low, again, throughout the month of May. If we look at the table on the bottom right-hand side of the page, we can look at U.S. Treasury yields for various maturities in different points in time. And I think this tells an interesting story. So on the short end of the curve, we can see that yields increased just a hair during the month of May, and that was largely driven by investor optimism over reopening of parts of the U.S. economy. But if we look at intermediate and longer term yields, we can see that those yields fell throughout the month, and that was really driven by investor pessimism and concerns over a resurgence of COVID-19 cases, uncertainty around vaccine development, and lower economic growth projections. So all in all, we're looking at a slightly flatter yield curve in the month of May as compared to the month of April. Looking at the financial markets more broadly, this mixed messaging continues as equity markets have generally been on an upswing this quarter, yesterday aside, buoyed by general investor optimism. But fixed income investors generally remain more pessimistic, preferring the relative safety of U.S. Treasury obligations above all else. So we'll skip over a few pages on general economic conditions and business sentiment. I really wanted to turn our attention today to a deeper dive into U.S. Treasury issuance and U.S. Treasury debt as a percentage of GDP. So to do that, let's turn to page 14 of your agenda packet. Now, I put this slide together in response to some questions, I believe, from Chair Sobel last month on U.S. Treasury debt issuance and the increasing debt load of the U.S. government. So to start our conversation, we can think of U.S. Treasury debt in 2 main buckets. First is intergovernmentally held debt. So this is debt that one part of the government owes to another. So think about things like Social Security and Medicare. Now this debt has been increasing slightly, but generally remained pretty stable. On the other hand, publicly held debt, which represents a much larger component of overall U.S. debt, has been increasing at a much more rapid pace, and it's shown in the blue bars, again on that top chart on page 14. Now, public debt is held by foreign investors, the Federal Reserve, banks, individual investors, state and local governments like yourself, and also mutual funds and pension funds as well. Now, foreign holders hold approximately 27% of total U.S. public debt. The largest foreign holders of U.S. public debt are Japan and China, holding 5% and 4% respectively of that total U.S. public debt load. Also interesting, I thought, would be to take a look at public debt as a percentage of GDP over time. So let's take a look at the chart on the bottom half of this page. And this is based on data released by the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. This data was released in January of 2020. So when looking at this chart, this tells us that overall public debt as a percentage of GDP has been increasing, and in particular, it tends to spike with each major war and economic event. So we can see some spikes beginning with the Civil War, through World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II. Now, it's important to note that this data was compiled in January of 2020, and at that time, public debt represented 81% of GDP and was projected to grow to 180% by 2050. Now, while the CBO has released some updated projections of near-term debt levels, they haven't yet updated their current projection of debt all the way out to 2050. So I think if we were to get those numbers, it would look a little bit more extreme, showing a higher projected debt level given the massive stimulus by Congress, which will be funded by increased Treasury debt issuance. So certainly the amount of Treasury debt outstanding has been increasing. However, investor appetite for that Treasury debt seems to be nearly insatiable as new issuance continues to be oversubscribed. Now, I did speak with one of our portfolio strategists about PFM to kind of get his thoughts and general market sentiment as well. So I think the thinking is the risk really would be inflation. You know, if the U.S. continued to issue debt at such a high level, that could spur inflation, but based on recent projections from the CBO, they're actually not thinking that that will be an issue in the near term, as they're expecting inflation to remain well below that 2% level. Of course, our kids and grandkids and their kids will be grappling with higher levels of U.S. debt in the future. But if you think about the alternative, you know, the alternative to this debt issuance would be the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Treasury doing nothing. So if there weren't those stimulus payments available, if there wasn't that massive amount of stimulus to be funded by Treasury debt, the alternative would be a much more drastic and severe economic slowdown and insolvencies for both businesses and individuals here in the U.S. And also looking at the investment market, you know, considering all other options available, the U.S. Treasury debt is still considered the safest investment available. Moving to page 16, I thought it would be interesting to note that you as a district have actually benefited from the strong investor demand for U.S. Treasury debt, and we took advantage of that for you in early May. In early May, when your traders took advantage of an opportunity to sell two significantly sized U.S. Treasury notes, which had increased significantly in market value due to strong investor demand. So we were able to sell those obligations within just weeks of maturity, realizing over $17,000 in gains. And the proceeds from the sales were invested in the district's LAIF account. So that actually increased the realized investment earnings on the district's portfolio. Moving on to page 18, your portfolio remains well diversified by both sector and issuer, and it remains in compliance with both California government code and your investment policy. Looking ahead, we are expecting fixed income rates to remain extremely low, given recent signaling by the Federal Reserve that they expect to hold that overnight Fed funds target rate at its current level of near zero through 2022, and all short and intermediate term high quality fixed income investments are kind of pegged to that rate. So we are expecting rates to remain low for the foreseeable future. We will continue to manage your portfolio to meet its primary objectives of safety and liquidity, but we will, even in this low interest rate environment, look for opportunities to add value, and we'll be continually evaluating the relative value of individual securities versus holdings in the district's LACE and CAMP accounts. And that brings me to the end of my prepared comments for this morning.
Thank you, Leslie. Madam Secretary, would you find out if we have board members who have questions?
Sure, thank you. Are there any members of the Finance Committee and the board who are on the line that have any questions for Ms. Murphy? Hearing none, I'm going to now try to pull the public line.
Well, I do have a. Oh yeah, yeah. Go to the public, and then I'll have a question.
Thank you.
You have been muted. To unmute yourself.
Good morning. Is there anybody who would like to speak on this item? Any member of the public who would like to speak? Okay, thank you.
Mute off.
All right, we have no members of the public speaking on this item.
Okay. So Leslie, first of all, thank you for the debt layout. You know, I think when you present it this way, it gives somebody perspective to understand that we hit almost 120% during World War II. And God help us if we hit 180 by 2050. We'll be begging the world for help because, as we know, Greece went to the EU at 120%. So anyway, but a very interesting chart. What I did want to focus on just for a second is you had presented in your deck on page 12 a chart with business owners are bracing for a long recovery. And what I discerned from this chart is originally people thought, hey, we'll get through this COVID thing really quickly, and we're gonna be fine. It's going to take a couple months, and we'll be out of it. But as time has marched on, you can see a sea change here in in when people believe recovery will occur. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, back in early March, 70% of respondents thought we'd be back to normal in a month.
Yeah.
Now only 10% of respondents are making that same assumption.
Yeah, and why I bring it up is, and it's an excellent chart, is that in the previous meeting we talked about, or somebody brought up how quickly riders would return to the bus system or the ferry system or crossing the bridge. And I think what we're seeing by this chart is that business owners are very pessimistic about how quickly we're going to recover. So it reminds us that we need to be realistic about what's going on here. We may not recover very quickly from this, which originally, as your chart as your chart points out, was a different opinion by most people at the beginning of this thing. So,
Brian.
Yes.
Brian, might I ask that she continue that chart for each month for the next few months to kind of see where we are, because I thought it was very.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jerry. I thought it's a really good chart. So, good, Leslie. If you'd continue that charting, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah. Let me see if I can see if PwC is going to update that. Happy to.
Okay, or you could get out of your crayons and do it yourself, or your colored pens or something. All right. Thank you. Are there other questions for Leslie by anybody? Okay, then I'll turn it back over to Amrit. But Leslie, feel better, and thank you for your report.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Chair. We have no public comments on this, so we're going to move on to, we need a motion to receive these ratifications. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Would Vice Chair Fredericks please move the item?
So moved.
And Director Cochran, would you please second the item?
Second the motion.
Wonderful. Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. I'll start with Director Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosboll.
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan. Director Moylan?
Oh, yeah.
You.
Thank you. And Willie says yes.
What's the dog's vote is what I want to know.
Director Yee? Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks?
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel?
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 6-0.
Great. Thank you. And then, Madam Secretary, would you go on to the next item, please?
Sure. Item number 4A is to authorize budget transfers and adjustments to the fiscal year 1920 operating budget. The staff report is found on page 25, and Joe Wire is on the line to present his report. Joe, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the committee. In front of you is a yearly item that we bring to the staff brings to the board each June, and this is because June is the last month in the current fiscal year. What this item does is provide the board, it asks the board for authority to move some funds either across divisions or within divisions, so it's just transfers only. It's not augmenting the size of the budget or the expenses in the budget. This particular year, the request is only to move funds within divisions to balance out some of the line items so that the line items come into agreement with the board's budget policies. The total amount that's being moved is approximately $1.9 million, and it occurs in 3 different divisions, bus, ferry, and district. There's a chart on the middle of the page 25 of your report, which labels the amount of each movement. Within bus, the money is being moved around to cover higher depreciation than we budgeted for. In ferry, it's being moved around because of needs to vessel repairs and also some expenses related to the new dock at the Chase Center. And then in the district, some money is being moved around into classifications because of the use of temp employees. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Joe, I have a question, Brian.
Yes, please.
The depreciation in the bus, why did we have that much of an increase in our depreciation?
It happens to be with the timing of the receipt of the brand new skilled buses, and then our estimate of their cost. But primarily, it was a timing issue. If you remember, the buses came right around the time of the splitting of a fiscal year, so we didn't have the depreciation necessarily in the right fiscal.
Oh, okay, all right.
So we didn't need to ask you for more resources because the district actually, we had other spending in other areas that wasn't being used, so we moved it to cover this. But it wasn't that the buses became more expensive or something like, or depreciated faster. It wasn't any change in depreciation rules.
Yeah,
thank you.
Good question. I had the same question. Other questions for Joe, please? Okay, I'm not hearing any other questions. Madam Secretary, do we need to go to the public and see if we have anybody from the public that would like to ask any questions on this?
Thank you. That's what we'll do right now. I'm going to hold the public line. Hold on one second. We have no speakers on this item.
Great, thank you. So we need a motion then to authorize the budget adjustments and transfers, and if I may go to Vice Chair Fredericks, would you move the item, please?
I move the item to approve the adjustments and transfers.
Wonderful. And Director Grosboll, would you please second the item?
Second.
Wonderful, thank you. Madam Secretary, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. Director Cochran?
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosboll?
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan?
Yes.
Yes. Director Yee? Absent. Vice Chair Frederick?
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel?
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
Great. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Continuing on to the next item, which is item 4B. It's to authorize a budget increase in the fiscal year 1920 Ferry Division capital budget for project number 2042. That's the Larkspur Ferry Service and Parking Expansion, Environmental Clearance and Preliminary Design Study. The staff report is on page 29, and Kelly Hopper will present this report. Kelly, would you begin?
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning.
We originally brought this item to the B&O earlier this morning to seek approval for the award of this contract. And now we are bringing to the Finance and Auditing Committee a recommendation to authorize a budget increase in the amount of $1,898,426 in fiscal year 1920 Ferry Division budget, for a total project budget of $3,148,426. As we mentioned earlier in the earlier committee meeting, that staff issued an RFP for the subject services to do a parallel analysis, environmental analysis at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. And one of it was to look at the increase in the number of ferry crossings per day, as well as an associated landside improvement component, which would look at the expansion of parking capacity around the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. As a result of the complexity of the analysis, and that we're doing them in parallel, as well as the need for a significantly more detailed wake analysis, the budget needs to be increased by $1.9 million to a total project, like I mentioned, of nearly $3.15 million. The requisite RFP is recommended to be awarded to Jacobs Engineering, and as Dennis has noted, they're a very well-regarded firm nationally and even internationally, and can conduct the service, and that the project will take approximately 2 years in duration due to the complexity of the analysis. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there questions for Kelly on this item 4B? So I think I'm hearing no questions. That concludes discussion on the item, but before we move on, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on the item? If you would check, please.
Will do. We'll check the line now. We have no speakers on this item.
All righty, thank you. With that said, then, Vice Chair Fredericks, would you please move the item?
So moved.
Thank you. Director Moylan, would you please second the item?
Yes, I do.
Wonderful. And would your dog please third the item? Not kidding. All right. Madam Secretary, would you do the roll call, please?
Thank you. Director Cochran?
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosbold?
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan?
Yes.
Yes. Director Yee? Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks?
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel?
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Motion passes 6-0.
Great. Thank you, Amarette. We will move on now to item 5A, which is to approve actions relative to the state of the Good Repair Program, SGR. The staff report is on page 33, and Joe Wire will present this report. Go ahead, please, Joe.
Thank you very much. This report, your chair just mentioned, is to a report that we bring yearly almost to the board. It is asking the board to provide the authority to the staff to apply for and receive stated good repair funds from SB1. The district is requesting $1.36 million, which is what is allocated to the district. This is not a program, a discretionary program, a sub-discretion that's allocated through formula. And we are requesting the $1.36 million, which we will then apply to the capital project that is in your capital plan to fund a new ferry vessel. The funds will be received this year, and we'll apply it to that long-term project. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Joe. Are there questions for Joe on this? 5A. All right, I'm not hearing any, but before we take a vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? And if Amrit, you would check, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. We're checking now. We have no speakers on this item.
Thank you. Then, hearing none, Vice Chair Fredericks, would you please move the item?
Move to approve actions relative to State of Good Repair program.
Thank you, Alice. And Director Cochran, would you please second the item?
Second the motion.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you do the roll call?
Thank you. Director Cochran?
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosval?
You know, I apologize for this. I had to step out. What is this motion on?
This is the motion on item 5A to approve actions relative to the State of Good Repair.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Moylan?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Director Yee? Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks?
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel?
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. The motion passes 6-0.
Thank you for that. So then we'll move on to item 6, which is to authorize execution of the Second Amendment relative to Professional Services Agreement number 2018-D059, the Insurance Advisor and Brokerage Services with USI Insurance Services. The staff report is on page 35, and Kelly Hopper will present the report. Kelly, would you begin, please?
Thank you. We're actually asking for the Finance-Auditing Committee to authorize the General Manager to execute the Second Amendment to this subject Professional Services Agreement to USI Insurance Services out of San Francisco, California, to extend the agreement for 1 additional year as well as 2 additional 1-year options, not to exceed a total amount of $222,872 for marine and property insurance support services. In March of this year, the board terminated its contract with our previous marine and property insurance broker, which was Alliant Services, due to their untimely submission of the marine general liability insurance. And as you recall, it necessitated a special board meeting for us to ratify the new contract. As a result, with this vacancy in the position, staff looked at what the previous submissions were from the proposers, and the second highest ranked proposal in that contract originally submitted behind Alliant was USI. Now, USI has a long and positive relationship with the district in that they currently handle all of our casualty program insurances. So for those reasons, we're asking the general manager at the time issued a First Amendment for a 6-month contract to take us through, but now we're trying to solidify that for the longer-term agreement to extend the marine and property insurance by 1 year and add the 2 additional 1 years, which would align with the previously existing contract with USI. And I'm available for any questions.
Okay, questions for Kelly on this item? Okay, I'm not hearing any. Kelly, quick question. So do you sit down with these folks and actually go through a negotiation on pricing?
Absolutely. With these brokers, and this broker in particular, having such a long relationship, we meet with them a number of times a year, and then also prior to our renewal times, we meet with them to explain any changes, district expectations, understanding a little bit of what's going on in the market, and so forth.
Okay, so we can assume that maybe they adjusted their pricing a little bit in our favor, or?
Well, with USI, they were highly qualified at the time. Alliant in the selection process deemed the highest bidder, and also they're our current existing casualty program, so they already are involved in certain areas here at the district, and so their proposal at the time was less than Alignment for the original proposal.
So we didn't sit down with them and try to take it down even more.
So, right, we're getting a lower price. That's correct.
Well, no, I understand that, but it sounds like we didn't take the first one, but we did end up with these folks, and so we just essentially accepted their bid. I mean, I'm not questioning that, but that's what it sounds like.
No, staff sat down and negotiated with them.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The other Kelly did, and the pricing is very favorable.
Okay. I'll leave it there. Perfect. Thank you. Then, not hearing additional questions, I would then open it up to anybody from the public wishing to speak on the item. Madam Secretary, would you check on that, please?
Will do. We'll check that now. Please hold.
Anybody? Nobody? Amaret?
No, we have no one online wishing to speak. Thank you.
All righty. Then, hearing that no one wishes to speak on this, I would ask for a motion to authorize execution of the Second Amendment. And Vice Chair Fredericks, would you move the item?
So moved.
Thank you. Director Grossball, would you second the item?
Second.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. We have Director Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. Director Grossball.
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks.
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes 6-0.
Great, thank you. So let's move on then to item 7 on the agenda, which is to approve renewal of the liability and property insurance programs. The staff report is on page 37 of your packet, and Joe Wire will present this report. Joe, would you please begin?
Again, thank you very much. Yes, this is a report that summarizes a lot of the work that USI, that you just approved their agreement, did for us in this renewal. We anecdotally received information from some of the staff at USI that they feel that this particular market that they're working in, not just our renewal, but just renewals in general this time, is as hard as they've been in the 30 some odd years they've been in the market. That's some idea when they say things like that, that means that it's going to be an expensive renewal. Because they have to work very hard to find firms that have the capacity, which means that have the ability to provide us with the insurance that we have become accustomed to over the years. We are paying a little more for it, and we will go through that on this report. This report is made up of 2 discrete sections. In fact, years ago, we used to have them separately in 2 different reports, but one of them is the liability program, which covers the district for liability issues. The other one is the property program, which covers district property. And so we'll go over them both, but I'll start with the liability, and then we'll talk about property, and that's how it's laid out in your report. Just a reminder that those of you who were able to be at the finance meeting last month, we did go over the market and how difficult it's been. So I'll touch on that, but I won't go into all the detail. But it is in your item, and it's all written down in the last report from last month also. But if you have questions, feel free to talk about them. But just to speed up, I won't go through all the market information that we discussed. But the net is that the aid insurers in both liability and property have had more payouts lately, which means they have had to dent it into their ability to make a profit. That has increased rates, but it provides a double whammy. It increases the rates, and then also it forces some to leave the market, so they no longer offer insurance in our particular needed areas, and that leaves fewer suppliers left. Unfortunately, those of us on the demand side, we're not less of us, so there's more demand facing less supply, which means those that have it to sell can raise their rates, and that's in a nutshell what we see and what we see here. Going down to the first page, the recommendation lists out all the different coverages. First, it lists out, and that's on the page 30, let me just look at the bottom, page 37. So it has, it lists out each of the different pieces of insurance that the district is, the district staff recommends to the finance committee, that the board, that we would renew this year. So I'll just go through them. They are discussed in more detail in the report that follows, but we'll use the recommendation section as a guide to keep them paging around too much. The first one listed as number 1 under the recommendation, which is to renew the excess general and automotive liability insurance program. This is the key element of this, basically entire package. It's also the most expensive. The renewal will be, as you see at the bottom of that paragraph, approximately $1.6 million. That is about a $350,000 or a 30% increase in price for this particular product. There also is a change in the retention for the auto side of the liability policy. That would be something to do with in our case, not necessarily a car, but a bus, a vehicle. That's generally where that's come into play for the district over the years. That goes from $2 to $3 million. Still less than where we've been in the past. Years ago, we were at $5 million. So it's still, it's good. In general, liability issues will remain, the standard retention will remain at $2 million. The story here is that we have about $100 million in coverage. The middle layers, which is the $25 to $50 to $75 million layers, very, very expensive increases, up to 50% increases on those because of the difficulty of finding people, companies that were willing and had capacity at those rates. Which because you pay less at a higher rate, at a higher level of the insurance coverage, because the incident is less likely to cost us $60 million than it is to cost us $5 million. So the people who give us the first $5 million insurance, we pay them a lot more. We pay these guys less, but in this particular case, that went up because there's just less capacity for that at this point in time. So that's by far the most expensive one. It is the one that protects us in many different ways at the district. Number 2, which is the excess workers' compensation, that was renewed at the same price as previous years. That provides us, we have a self-insured retention of $1 million, a limit of $25 million. We've had that same for, I think, more than a decade now. And the premium is the $380, and that has not changed. Number 3, that's renew the public officials and liability insurance. This one has had losses. They relate to the Saliani case that you guys have been briefed on several occasions over the last many years that this case has been ongoing. And so the rate on that one went up by approximately, I think it was about $40,000, so about a third, and that was really to do with the fact that we've had significant losses. And they also raised the sort of standard retention from $350,000 to $500,000. This was sort of the best we could do at this. In future years, we might be able to knock this rate down. And the same goes true for the liability one that was two before. I forgot to mention that. As you see in the chart, that's about 2 pages further in the report. We have paid a lot more in the past, and the price went down. The price is now back up. Very likely it'll go down in the future when more people enter the marketplace. Number 4, the OPEB Trust Board insurance is the same as last year. That's for the directors who serve on the OPEB Trust Board. Number 5 is we're in the second year of a 3-year policy around our crime insurance, and that rate has stayed the same because we're in this, as I said, the second of 3 years. And number 6, which is a cyber liability policy, we That rate has increased by approximately $27,000, a very significant increase for that particular price, up to $59,000. However, the reason it's increased was that the district decided to expand the coverage of this particular policy. What the district is finding, and we have been fortunately not hurt by this, but we've been in the middle of these scams in the past, is that there is a lot of what they call social engineering fraud, and that's the kind of fraud where a outside entity gets the inside people inside an organization to act in a way that has money leave the company in a fraudulent manner. It is something that happens all around the country constantly. We've had a lot of advice. This is being very aggressively fought, but it's also being the thieves of the world have found this is a very fertile ground. So this insurance coverage would provide us some coverage in case something were to happen to the district. So that, in summary, is the liability program. And I think my plan was just go ahead and talk about property and then take questions. But if there's a need to stop, please step in and let me know.
Why don't we just take a quick pause and see if anybody has questions for Joe on the first part of the report on liability. Anything? Okay. All right, Joe, so second part.
Thank you very much. So turning to the second part, again, staying on the same page, looking at the recommendations to the board. The first one is to renew the property insurance with AIG. That price went up significantly. We were expecting, as I think we told you last month, anywhere up to 30%. In the end, it ended up being an 18% increase. So less than we were told that it might happen, but still a very significant increase, approximately $69,000. This was due to the market receiving a number of losses in fires and floods, both locally and nationally, and therefore they're seeing rates across the board to make up for those losses. So that was the primary reason behind that. The second renewal was for a small policy that covers the few Marine Transit buses the district has on its property. That's part of our agreement with Marine Transit that we would cover. We provide property insurance coverage for those vehicles. And then lastly, number 3 is the board is recommending, the staff's recommending the board to continue funding the contingency reserve for self-insurance for the bridge, the physical part of the bridge. This was a program started approximately 13 years ago and the district decided that the board at that time decided it was better to take its money that it was spending on premium and put that into reserve and build up a reserve that approximately $25 million, which was the amount of coverage we were able to buy back then, and that we would have that money in our own account and use that if some issue occurred in order to fix something or to bridge the districts until it was able to receive money to fix whatever may have happened to the bridge in an incident. So that would be continuing under this proposal. And in summary, if you look at both actions, the entire liability proposal would increase by approximately 24% to $2.2 million, and then the entire property package increases by approximately 15%. Those numbers are slightly more than we budgeted in the budget that you have on this agenda that we talked about last month. That you have, we had budgeted, as I said, for increases, but not quite as much as it ended up. So this would increase the overall budget by about $150,000, which than we expected prior to this renewal. Are there any questions?
Yeah, questions, Joe, for Joe, please. Yeah, I'm not hearing any. Joe, good job on this. This is a very complex arena.
Well, you can thank Kelly Talley, who you talked to many times before, for doing a lot of the hands-on work with the USI brokers to get this done.
Yeah, if you would pass along a thank you from the committee members to her as well, that would be appreciated.
I'm sure she's listening.
Yep. Okay. Good. Sadly, the increase in premium overall is, just one more thing we have to deal with. But
Exactly.
It is what it is.
And that is the message to USI, that they have 12 months to see what they can do to bring us back down.
Yep. Great. Okay. If there are no questions in for Joe, we would open it up to see if there's anybody from the public wishing to speak on the item.
All right, we're going to pull the line. Thank you. Hang on one second. We have no one on the line wishing to speak on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, then, hearing none, if we could receive a motion to approve the renewal of the liability and property insurance programs, and I would ask Vice Chair Fredericks if you would move the item.
So moved.
Thank you. Director Moylan, would you second the item?
Yes.
Wonderful. Madam Secretary, if you would do the roll call, please.
Thank you. Starting with Director Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. We have Director Grosboll.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Frederick.
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. The motion passes 6-0.
Great. Thank you, Amaret. Moving on to item 8, which is the authorization of the execution of a professional services agreement relative to request for proposals number 20D014, third-party administrator for public liability, fleet claims investigation and adjustment services with George Hill's company. The staff report is on page 45, and Kelly, you're going to present the report?
Yes. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Chair. We are asking for the Finance Auditing Committee to approve a 3-year base contract with 2 one-year options to George Hill to provide our third-party administration services for our liability, property, and fleet claims. This includes investigation, cost containment, litigative management, and resolution. The total not to exceed amount is $1,095,000. The district is self-insured, and we have a $2 million liability cap, and we've used third-party administrator for many, many years to help us adjust our bus and ferry and public liability claims. And the reason being is that we do not have the expertise resident in-house, and they're able to provide us with a review of our claims, investigations, adjusting, and settling claims on behalf of the district. We sent out the RFP, and we received 4 qualified firms provided their proposals. After a selection committee review, the committee determined that George Hill meets all the requirements and are best qualified to perform the services. If you recognize that name, that is correct, because they were the prior incumbent to the district, to the current third-party administrator. So they have strong transit experience, strong district experience, and understand, as well as the technical expertise and knowledge. So I'm available to answer any questions you may have regarding this recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Are there any questions on item 8 for Kelly? Okay. I don't hear any. So I'll conclude the discussion on this item and ask the Secretary if there's anyone from the public wishing to speak on the item. Amaret, would you check, please?
Will do. We're going to pull the line now. We have no speakers on this item.
Great. Thank you very much. So hearing none, Vice Chair Fredericks, would you move the item?
I move to authorize execution of a professional services agreement relative to request for proposals, number 2020D 014, third party administrator for public liability fee claims, investigation, and adjustment services with George Hills Company.
Alice, you have done a wonderful job so far today on your on your moving. And Director Cochran, would you please second the item?
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Wonderful. Madam Secretary, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. We have Director Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosboll.
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks.
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. The motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. So we move on to item 9, to authorize execution of the Second Amendment to the Parking Services Agreement with Parkmobile USA Incorporated and Parkmobile Group BV relative to contract number 2014 FT19, collection of parking fees at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. The staff report starts on page 47 of your packet. And Joe, you're going to present the report?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Joe. If you would, please.
Sure. This is a report, recovery recommendation to continue services with Park Mobile for their work in managing the collection of parking fees at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. If you may remember, the last year the district came to the board to engage a different vendor to provide a different level of service at the Larkspur parking lot. We have been under negotiations to implement that and have ceased those negotiations because of the COVID situation and felt it would be better just to maintain current practice for another year or so and then take a look at whether or not the change that we were envisioning is still the right thing to do. So because of that decision, we have come back to the board and requested that we renew this contract for another approximately 18 months to the end of 2021. The cost of the service is the same, approximately $65,000 a year, and that would be prorated out over those 18 months. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Okay, questions for Joe on this, on item 9. I'm not hearing any, so that concludes the discussion on this item. Is there anybody from the public wishing to speak on this item? And Amrit, I'll let you poll and see if anybody wants to chime in.
Will do. Thanks a lot. Give us 1 second. We have no speakers on this item.
Very good. Then hearing none, Vice Chair Fredericks, would you please move the item?
I move to authorize execution of the Second Amendment to the Parking Services Agreement with Park Mobile USA Incorporated and Park Mobile Group BV relative to contract number 2014 FT19, collection of parking fees at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Director Grosboll, would you please second the item?
Second.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you do the roll call vote, please?
Thank you. Starting with Director Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosboll.
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks.
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. The motion passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 10 on the agenda, which is the annual review of the district's 457B deferred compensation and 401A defined contribution programs. The staff report begins on page 49. And Joe, you're going to also present this report.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
This is your, as already mentioned, this is the annual report of these two programs. There is not a specific action that's being requested or to change these programs. The 457 program is sponsored by the district where employees can put in contributions for a retiree that they then would use in retirement. And the 401A plan are set up to support the district employees, and they have contributions from, some of them have contributions from both the employer and the employee. And they're set up for very specific reasons. There's a lot of detailed information in the report, which I can get to if there are questions. But the important thing is to notice just on page 50, which is the second page of the actual report, the plan assets have been growing. This is we have a quite robust program of employees by their own choice putting funds into this program. From 18 to 19, the program increased by approximately $17 million. And even as of now, even though, as we all know, the market has had a very unusual period in the last 3 or 4 months, the program is only down about 1.4% or $1.4 million from where you see this 2019 number of $97 million. So it's been done well. We have a lot of participants, up to over 900 participants. That has been growing, and their average balance, of course, has been growing with the increase in their contributions and also the increase in the market. As I mentioned, the 401A plan is mentioned on page 51, and there's a lot of there's detail on each of its programs. Its programs were set up to address particular issues. For example, the issue where the PEPR program limits the amount of a pension benefit that an employee can make if their salary goes past a particular point. And once their salary does, they and the district are required to put in matching contributions to make up for that cap that was in the PEPR program. We have a few employees in that to this day, and it's working as planned. And then we also have a handful of employees in the what we call the 2 at 60 group, which is also mentioned on page. It's set up the same way. In order to sort of bridge the gap between the 2 at 60 program and the 2.5 at 55, the employee and the employer put in matching contributions beyond a particular point. The remainder of the report discusses the fund performance and the management of the fund. Both the 401A and the 457 plan are all invested in the same funds, and the employee has the choice of moving the money between the funds they choose as appropriate. And they can do it themselves, or they can purchase management support from ICMARC, who is the vendor. The fund performances are monitored regularly. And there's a regular watch list that's set up by a NFP, who is a consultant that the district hires to support its management of these funds. And through that, we and the consultant replace funds that aren't doing very well, and we map the employees' resources over to the new funds, and that's to keep performance high. And that's discussed in the report and also in the attached appendices. The other thing that we concentrate on in managing these funds is keeping the fees as low as possible. We were able to negotiate with ICMARC in their newest contract to lower their management fees from almost 15 basis points down to 7 basis points. So a 50% reduction in their fees that they get to manage the fund. So it's been successful, and it has very low fees. If there are any questions, I am happy to take them at this point.
Great, Joe. Thank you. I'll ask for questions, but before I do that, I'll congratulate you on a good negotiation on reducing those fees. So questions? Yep.
I pass it on to Alice Ng. Alice has done a good job in managing this directly.
Wonderful, wonderful. Questions for Joe? Great. A reminder that if you're not speaking, please put your phones on mute. Thanks. So, Joe, I'm not hearing any questions. One thing that just jumped out, but it's a very, very minor thing. We still have a couple of people in the SERP program?
We do not have, the CERT program itself was closed.
Right.
And was wiped out. So no, there's no one in that program. The ones that were there, the legacy individuals, were moved into the 401A program. And their particular group in this 401A program, because we have 3 different groups, is called the SERP in quotes group,
okay.
just to differentiate them from the others. But they're not in that program. The program does not exist. It hasn't for 5 or 7 years.
Right, since 2012. So.
Yes. Yes, it's 2012. There you go.
Yeah, but so that was a good clarification for me. But thank you. So, any other questions for Joe? I'm not seeing any. Amrit, would you check and see if anybody from the public wishes to speak on this item?
Sure, we will do that right now.
Thank you.
We have no speakers for item 10, so we can
Great. Thank you. Well, no action is required by the committee today on this item, so we will continue to the next item, which is item number 11, to approve the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 operating and capital budget. The staff report is on page 59. I know that we all have our proposed budget books, which were initially presented at last month's meeting. So, Joe, if you would please present your report.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is we mentioned this the second time we've brought this forward. So in practice, what I usually do is we don't go over the budget book again like we did last month, although I'm happy to take any questions that you might have of that document. But what we do is we take a look at the actual recommendations that the staff is requesting. The Finance Committee and the Finance Committee request the board, so I will do that here. One unusual difference from past practice is we do have an added request in the recommendation section. We would like to update the recovery path for the bridge due to the fact that traffic has increased a little bit better than we had originally projected 2 months ago when we were putting the budget together. So I will get to that. Overall, it is a $242 million budget in expense with $145 million in revenue due to the reductions because of COVID. That is a $92 million difference between those two numbers. And as the budget discusses and the staff and the board discussed at the last meeting, those are decisions that the board will be making in these next couple of months in order to close that gap to equate expenses with revenues. That would be increasing revenues in some form or decreasing expenses in some form. And that'll be the charge to all of us in the coming months to balance the budget. The capital budget is also included in the document. It remains unchanged. We have $29.1 million in revenue, $48.7 million in expenses, covers close to 70 programs, and the difference between those two would be funded out of district reserves, as has always been planned. That's why each year, of course, as we discussed, we set aside revenues from the district's operating budget into its reserves in order to fund this capital budget in the subsequent years. So that is going on as planned. Looking at the recommendations themselves, they are on the first page of your board item, which is page 59. The first recommendation is that the board is authorizing the district goals, projects, and accomplishments, which are discussed in the division sections of the budget, changes to the reserve structure, changes to table organization. There are several of them. They are also discussed in the opening sections of the budget, but again in the district sections. It incorporates this particular budget incorporates the pay and benefit increases for the ATU union that were negotiated and settled in March of this year. There is no COLA increase for represented employees that are in the coalition group or for the non-represented employees. They are not included in this. The coalition represented employees are under negotiation at this time. so that anything that were to occur from that negotiation would need to be added later. And that is common practice for the district. Number 3, we authorize the capital contribution. That it would be still included in this budget. That would be the money I mentioned earlier that we set aside each year in order to fund future capital projects, and that amount is set at $21 million. Number 4 it's a series of actions that the staff requests of the board in order to keep to make the budget essentially as up to date as possible when we finalize it with adopt budget. So A is that any actions that are approved upwards to June 30th of this year would be included into the document. We want to carry over any incomplete capital projects that we haven't done yet, that we didn't already know we were carrying over. And now those as of June 30th. We would asking for authority to move. I think the budget includes about 5 capital projects in its capital project list that if the staff were to have time in order to take on those projects, the board is being requested to grant the general manager authority to move those projects into the budget. And D is to do any transfers that become necessary in the last days of the year that are beyond what you just approved in the first item that we ran through today. And E is the new one. And that is to update the bridge traffic recovery rates. What I would ask that you page down to page 65 in your packet, that is the last page of this particular board item. It is the updated traffic, COVID traffic assumptions. The reason these are critically important is they determine the revenue that's actually in the budget. So if you approve this, we will add this to the budget. What it will do is it will increase the revenues in the budget by approximately $11 million, which will decrease that $98.2 million gap that we're trying to close to an $87.2 million gap. So it makes a small adjustment to that gap, close to 10, 11, 12%. So that's a good thing. The reason we are asking the board to do this is that, as I mentioned, the last 2.5 months since we built the first revenue recovery path structures, people have been coming back and using the bridge and driving across the bridge. The differences are quite dramatic in the first couple of months of the year, July, August, and by September and October they get a little smaller, and then throughout the year they're relatively small differences because in our last recovery path, we expected things to start out a little bit slower, but then catch up. In other words, the traffic to grow through the year. We still expect that. So, for in July, the difference is a whole 21% different. Moved from 37% to 15%. August, the difference is only 17. In September, it's 10. October, 7. And the rest through the winter it's 5, and then 4, 3, 2. So it gets smaller as you move out into the year. This revenue path still ends the year expecting the bridge only to have gotten back to 85%. I think Director Sobel pointed out that in Leslie's report from PFM in the very beginning of the meeting that many people are expecting that businesses won't be completely back to normal in a year's time, and so this is reflecting that also that same trend to do that. So that request is part of your recommendation, and the board staff is asking you to approve this, and we will then include it in the final budget. And that is the report. That at least my spoken part of the report. There is a number of others in here, and of course the document itself. If you have any questions on either this report or the budget document, I will be happy to take those at this time.
All right. Questions for Joe on the proposed budget?
I have a request.
Yeah.
I have a request. Joe, would you update this recovery rate similar to what we asked Leslie to do in her report so we kind of get a feel? Because, if any of this starts falling apart, then we've got to go back and look at the whole budget thing again.
Yes, absolutely. We do plan and will be doing that. Yes.
Okay.
And we will bring it to the board.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
This is Dick. I I do have a comment probably, but I'm curious. I wouldn't mind hearing if there's any public testimony on this. I know a lot of letters were received. I don't know if they're going to be here today or tomorrow, or if at all.
Tomorrow.
I think, yeah, I would say tomorrow, based on, the bus side of things, we should be hearing from a lot of people.
Is there any?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could you
Sorry,
see if
Dave.
there is any public testimony today? I assume it'll be mostly tomorrow. But.
Well, yeah, I was going to take questions and then take public comment, but if you want me to check and see if there's any public comment before, as an example, I have a couple of comments. So, but let's make sure the committee gets their questions in, and then we'll go to the public. Any other committee members want to comment at this point before I ask if there's any public comment?
Well, this is Dick. I guess I will comment. My understanding, Joe, is that this budget does not anticipate any changes in reduction of the staffing in the bus division or the ferry division. That those reductions, if they're going to take place, will take place in subsequent actions of the board over the next 2 to 3 months. Is that right?
That is correct.
In fact, this budget, this shows actually the 3% increase for the transit folks, and it shows an increase in staff in several areas. And so that's what we're approving today, but you're essentially warning us that you're coming back in the next 2 or 3 months to probably propose some cuts if we don't get any more money out of the feds. Is that a fair assessment?
That is exactly correct, yes. If things remain as they are today, which we expect and we have been planning, the district staff will be bringing back to the board specific actions in the coming months to reduce that difference in revenues and expenses, which is now, if you approve this, will stand at $87 million. We'll need to get that down to zero. So yes, there will be a number of discrete actions that the board will have an opportunity to review and then take action on as they see fit in the coming months.
I mean, it may be better to... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
One at a time. Dick, finish your comments, please.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that, and I guess we're going to get a lot of, I assume we're going to get a lot of testimony given the letters that were sent tomorrow, but it sounds like the proposal with the way the bus changing schedule is being proposed for how the bus drivers bid and all that is being done now, and that's not, that action, if they're correct in what they're saying, and I'm not assuming they are, that's going to result in a lot of them taking less pay, and that's being done prior to the board taking any action subsequent to this budget. That's a little concern I have. Again, we can talk about it tomorrow once we get the public testimony, but that does concern me. And so I guess that's my primary concern.
Okay.
Could I address that, Mr. Chair?
Yes, absolutely.
So staff is trying to postpone and delay having to lay off any employees because we know you would prefer not to have to make those decisions. At this juncture, nobody's riding our bus, and nobody's riding our ferry service. Nobody's a slight exaggeration, but very slight. So we are trying to reduce costs where we can. We're trying to put service out there that meets the demand for that service. So we are not running baseball service to the Giants game, and we're not getting casual employees out of the hall on the maritime side, but we're keeping all of our regular full-time employees on board. And every full-time district employee is receiving a paycheck and medical benefits for them and their families. With respect to the bus changes, the July sign-up reflects customer demand for our bus service. Today, only about 15% of our customers are riding the bus. Service is, the demand is down about 85%. In July, we're actually adding peak service on what we call our basic routes, the 30, 40, and 70, because we're seeing some ridership returning to those routes. However, there is no return of bus customers to our commute routes. And so we're cutting about half of our commute routes, and then we're expanding the extra board. So the drivers will still be employed with us, but they'll be on call. So if someone calls in sick, we can have them fill in easily. And also, if people start coming back on some of the commute service, we can add trips easily with the extra board because they're flexible drivers. Historically, the nature of the commute service results in drivers having very long days. And so the changes in July will reduce the number of drivers who will need to work 12 and 13-hour days. Anytime we do a sign-up, some drivers see more money and some drivers see less money. That is true this time. However, this time we'll see more that'll see less money because the drivers that had those 12 and 13-hour days may have an 11 or an 11.5-hour day, and that long day does correspond to overtime and pay. But what this allows us to do is to not have buses out there where there is no demand for the service. Referring back to the Leslie Murphy chart that Chair Sobel pointed out, initially we thought that this would bounce back in a month like all the employers, so we did not immediately cut the commute trips. We kept them out there even though we might only have one person on bus. In fact, that was about our average. Then in June, we reduced the commute trips some, thinking that it's going to bounce back but a little more slowly. But now we're trying to match the demand. And so we're doing a sign-up based on our customer demand, which is what we always do. In recent years, we've been adding trips and lengthening days because we've had an increasing demand. Now that we're having a drastically reduced demand, we are changing the service to meet that demand. And so some of the drivers that have a lot of tenure will see smaller paychecks. But the benefit of this is that we're not laying off bus drivers in order to protect the big paychecks for other drivers. And with respect to the CARES Act money, we anticipate that even with the second tranche of money, the entirety of the CARES Act money will be spent by the district sometime in July, or maybe if bridge traffic picks up a little bit, only through September, and that takes into account this July sign-up. So we're looking at very difficult times.
Does that mean, Dennis, the impact on the ferries will then probably be felt if we don't have an additional money? And they're down. I know they were down 99%. I assume it's a little bit better, but not much, according to Joe. Is there a plan for? You'll be coming back to the board to deal with yes. Some of the ferry employees. It sounds like.
Yeah, we'll be coming back to the board in the coming months on all facets of the organization to reduce costs. The most significant changes will be where the public does not want our services. You know, we provide service where the public wants it, and on the ferry side, there's very, very, very little demand, and we think this is all temporal. But while there's no demand, if we run out of federal stimulus money, and if there's not additional stimulus money, the House did pass the HEROES Act. That would help if the Senate took it up. The House passed an INVEST Act, a transportation reauthorization that would provide additional monies. If those don't come through, at some point we will have to take to you some pretty significant changes in our bus and ferry service design, which means it will impact a lot of employees. And those impacts will trickle through the whole organization because if for a period of some months we have fewer bus operators and fewer deckhands and captains in the ferry boats, we won't need the same number of people in payroll or procurement, perhaps. And so we'll be looking at all facets of the organization. We're working very hard with other transit operators to advocate in Washington, D.C., because only the feds can print money to see if we can avoid these scenarios. But we are going through the planning exercise as we speak. If it doesn't come back or if bridge traffic doesn't jump, if it follows the trend that Joe just presented to you, what would we look like?
Okay. One other, it's not a big point, but I did have a brief conversation with Joe yesterday. My understanding is the budget also includes filling all of the unfilled positions, at least from a budget standpoint, but my understanding is that unless they're critical positions, you're not going to be filling those, or I guess that would be a request.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct. I've told staff that we will not be filling positions unless they're necessary. So I will fill positions that are dealing with our bridge sergeants and patrol officers because they save lives out on the bridge. And we will fill positions for bus servicers to clean buses because we've enhanced cleaning. And I will fill positions that are grant funded, but almost every other position is on hold until we see what our financial future looks like.
And I guess the question I'll ask tomorrow, but you can think about is I realize that our capital projects is a lot of that money is coming from other sources, and we may only be paying 20% of it, but I guess the other issue is whether or not any of those projects could be delayed a year, or so it's not all in this budget that would free up other money. As my understanding is that this is we're going full bore on the capital projects in the ordinary course. Is that correct?
We will be looking at all facets of the organization when we come back to the board in the coming months. Okay. And so there may be some capital projects that can be delayed, and that delay may provide some choices for the board that they may, if they want, choose to spend some capital money near term, recognizing that future toll increases would have to be larger to backfill that money for when those capital projects come forward.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dick. Excellent points. Somebody's on speakerphone, and we're hearing a lot of background noise. If you're on a speakerphone, would you please put it on mute? Thanks. So we have the budget in front of us, and it's one of the most dire we have seen in a very long time, owing to the pandemic. My concern is, my interest is in making sure that the public and our employees are very, very clear on what we're being faced with here. And so I would like to hear more about how we're going to communicate the budget and the loss of revenue and that sort of thing. Dennis or Joe, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, we're communicating with our employees regularly. I'm not sure everyone hears the message.
Yeah.
In my currently since COVID-19, I've been doing 2 memos to all employees every week. And in one of those in recent weeks, I always include bridge, bus, and ferry ridership to highlight that.
Yep.
And to highlight the fact that money's not coming in. But we could certainly do more focused communication on this topic. We encourage all of our managers to talk to the staff and present it. So I know Mona's got a meeting coming up with her staff, and she shared with me the slide deck that has that $98.2 million hole from Joe's presentation last week in it. So we are having conversations with employees. I think hope springs eternal, so I think some of our employees maybe hoping it doesn't happen. I think other employees feel that their segment of the district somehow is sacrosanct, and nothing will be sacrosanct as we come forward in the coming months. But we will continue to communicate with our employees about the severity of the challenges that we face.
Yeah, and I think
we'll try to get through.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. It's those memos are excellent. I just hope they're not falling on deaf ears. And where this particular budget, to Dick's point, is going to be malleable. It's going to be changing because of either we're making more progress against COVID and more people are going back to work, or frankly people aren't riding the buses or aren't riding the ferries, and our budget's going to have to reflect that. And have to reflect some more, I hate the word draconian, but more draconian measures to deal with the deficit. And we don't have a choice here. We can't print money, as somebody said. I think it was Joe. We don't have that ability. And so we're going to have to deal with it. And yeah, maybe we can move some money over from capital projects or whatever, but I'm not sure that's the solution either. I think part of the solution is really coming to grips with what we're going through right now. And it's something we have never gone through, and I'm not sure we're coming out of it as quickly as some who are optimistic think we will. We may be seeing a sea change in the way people use public transit. And until people feel comfortable getting on a bus again or getting on a ferry again, they're going to drive in their car, which, by the way, is a bonus to the bridge because we collect tolls. But it has a net terrible effect on buses and ferry. So we've got a lot of challenges in front of us. I only say that because I don't want to go through approving a budget without everybody being really realistic about the fact that staff is going to probably have to come back to us with across-the-board measures that may reflect that we're not coming back from COVID as quickly as we would all like, and that we may be seeing actual changes in commuter behavior that may not rebound the way we hope. So that's my statement on it, and I'll ask if any other committee members have anything they'd like to say.
Yeah, this is Jim. I have a quick question. Is that all right?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. Yeah, jump in. Yeah, no. There was silence. I didn't. No, jump in.
Okay. Relative to the methodology used for the recovery rate, and early on, I get that it's based on trend, but looking out a year, is that just an extrapolation of that trend, or are there other factors that were used to come up with those numbers? And I assume it would apply for bridge, bus, and ferry.
Yes. The new one that you see on the last page of the item, page 65, that follows the exact same trend. The understanding we had of the trends previously, the seasonality trends. It just starts from a higher point and ends at a slightly higher point. Of course, the reason we start from a higher point is that actual behavior has increased to where in June, we will probably see an average of 55 or 56%, and we expect it to grow some in July, so that's why we picked that number. So it should start approximately where you see that, and we're then using the same trend we had before. We're seeing growth in the fall, in the first part of the fall, and then holding on to that through the winter. That is our typical behavior that we have at the district in its business models, where the winter doesn't see an increase in traffic and we lose our visitors and we lose people just making that occasional trip in and out of the city or something like that. So we're hoping for a flat fall, flat winter, and then when we get back into spring, with some small increases in spring to get back up. We previously had thought and had been sort of following the conventional wisdom of the day at that time to say that even in a year we won't be back to normal. That seems to be still very true, even with this bridge traffic model. And this does assume that since we operate essentially control all of the ways across the straits, the northern straits from Marin, Sonoma counties into San Francisco, that we assume that we may see an increase in people crossing the strait, but if we do, that's primarily going to be in their vehicles, and so we see a little bit of growth there. We haven't changed the outlook for the bus and ferry recovery paths, and that was based on the fact that neither of them are doing as well as we had hoped they'd been doing at this point.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Director Grossbull, if you have time, I have a comment and a question. This is Barb.
Oh, Barb, you want to comment? Yeah, jump in.
I do, and it's just what went through my mind as I read this chart a couple of days ago, the bridge traffic chart. It feels really optimistic, and I understand that it follows the research that they've tried to do so far, and that people will get in their cars first before they'll get in our buses and ferries. Joe, is it possible to do the same kind of projection recovery analysis for buses and ferries? I think, and I read all the notes that came to us, but I think people are getting a little, they're braiding their information a little bit. And to only present the bridge traffic, I understand the fare box recovery, and people understand that at some level, I guess. But is it possible to be realistic and say, okay, in June we had this many bus, or in February we had this many bus riders, and then project that out for a year? Because the numbers aren't that optimistic for buses and ferries. They're only optimistic for traffic.
Correct. The in the COVID section of the proposed budget, that was in the pages, approximately pages, the high teens into the 20s. If you in that first section, we did put forward a recovery path for bus and ferry, and they look exactly the same as the bridge one, except the numbers are considerably lower. We didn't think they would grow as much. What we haven't suggested to the board at this time, at least, is changing those. So the budget is still built. The budget revenues are still built on those much lower recovery path rates for bus and ferry. They start as low as, say, 10% on ferry, and they don't get any higher than 50%. I think, and this gets back to a question I think it was asked earlier, could you keep us up to date on these recovery paths? Yeah, we intend to do that. As the year gets underway, we will be following to see where we are and how that relates to what we expected. In other words, what we built into the budget. So, for example, if ferry doesn't reach 10% by July, which it may not, given that it's only about 3% now, if it doesn't reach ferry 10% by July, then we would need to come back to you and say ferry does not look like it's reaching its objectives. Maybe we ought to relook at its recovery path. And we would do the same with bus. It was supposed to be around 20. I think it's about 15, 16 now. It might make it to 20. So maybe it'll be on target. So we can do that. We will.
And maybe that's my problem for not putting those two together. But I of course went to the budget page because that's where the hard decisions are going to have to be made. Would it be more understandable, maybe even just for me, if that bus and ferry charting on recovery was included as part of the budget as well as the bridge? Because any negative effects we have from not having ridership on the buses and ferries are going to be as important to the budget as the increase in bridge traffic. See what I'm saying is it's really two sides of the same story, and I didn't realize that the COVID section had the bus and ferry. I mean, I skipped right over that because it was about COVID. But I certainly tuned in on it with the budget.
Yeah, so we absolutely, you make a very good point. In this particular board item, we just put the bridge one because that was the only one we wanted to change. We didn't include the other two because we weren't asking you to change them, but in hindsight, we definitely could have, and that would have made it more complete. In the COVID section, we do address both bridge, bus, and ferry, all three of them. We addressed them all along with some other revenues that were affected by COVID, and that was to explain to the reader and of course to the board and to the staff that these recovery paths drive the revenues the district will have to run its business. In the way we were set up as an institution by our chartering legislation all the way back in the 20s and then adjusted into the 70s, we are a fee-based agency. In other words, if we don't collect a fee, we don't have any money to run the service. It's just the way it works. And so it's extremely important for us to keep focusing on the amount of fee, or in this case a toll or a fare. The amount of fee that we get has to equate to the amount of service we can provide. We have a little extra support from some local grants that come from, TDST, that comes from the counties, but it doesn't make up the bulk of our business. The bulk of our business are in fares and tolls. Tolls even more so. So these are the key elements. That's why we put them in that section to say these have changed from where we started. In other words, when we put the budget together, we thought we would have very relatively normal patterns, bus, ferry, and bridge, and then boom, March 16th or before, and for ferry it started March 7th and 8th. The bottom just dropped out of our demand for our services. And I think what Dennis mentioned was that bottom dropped out. It's coming back more so on bridge, not so much on bus and ferry. We're monitoring that. In the meantime, we've been given revenues from the federal government that said, keep your employees employed as long as this money holds out. Hopefully things will have gotten back to normal by then. We all thought that was a good idea. We hoped it was a good idea. It looks like August things aren't back to normal and the money runs out. That we're preparing for the changes that we'll have to make that Dennis mentioned, that we'll come back to you in July and August and talk about. That says if things don't get back to normal, which they clearly don't look like they're going to by then, we're going to have to make changes to equate the service that we provide, or in other words, the fees that we collect, the service we provide, with the service that's being demanded by the customer. And right now, the customer is demanding 3% of its service on ferry, 15% on bus, and we're providing more than that, and we won't be able to afford that once the federal money comes out.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Good question, Barb. Other committee members have questions? Okay, not hearing any. Joe, would it be helpful to provide the board with a document? I would call it maybe something like budget assumptions update every meeting. And what it would do is it would look at what we assumed as staff versus actual, because that would give us an idea of, hey, we're making predictive assumptions here, but we either are on track, we're not rebounding as quickly as we thought, or we're doing better than we thought. And the point of it is I want to keep sharp focus on this budget, because as I read, all sorts of letters and things like that, it's clear that people aren't really clear on the numbers and how those numbers affect the budget. This is, we're running a business here, and if you don't have revenue, that becomes a big problem, and you have to make some really tough calls on that. You can only move money around, so much before you eventually have to do something. And I just don't want, I don't want any surprises, and I don't think anybody is going to be surprised, but I just want I think a sharper focus on this. Any ideas on that?
Yes, we have been, staff has been working on something to put across that message clear and track the pace of our institution's ability to deal with this $98 million issue, which of course would include both changes to revenue, which is I think what you're discussing, and also changes to expense. And we plan on at least bringing it, in draft form, and it's going to be an ever-changing document. So we'll bring it in July, which will be the first month of the year, and kind of show you where we are, and then each month after that we can bring it back, and we can make changes based on comments from your committee and from other directors. We can make changes as we go forward. It's going to have to be something that's iterative.
Yeah, no question, and I want to emphasize that is that more than in past years, this is going to be a very fluid document.
Yes.
So, all right, I think maybe enough said on all of that. I would go to the public if there's any public wishing to speak on this item.
Thank you. We're going to pull the public line now. We have no one on the line wishing to speak on item number 11.
All righty. Thank you. Then with that in mind, we do need to approve the proposed operating and capital budget, and I would go to Vice Chair Fredericks to ask if you would move the item.
So moved.
Wonderful. And Director Moylan, would you please second the item?
It appears that Director Moylan has dropped off the call, so we'll have to go to the next person.
Okay. Would somebody please like to second the item?
Certainly. I'll second the motion.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Then, Madam Secretary, would you do a roll call vote on this?
Thank you. Director Cochran?
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosboll?
Well, I'm going to vote yes, reserving the right to change my mind tomorrow. So, yes.
Okay.
Fair enough. Director
So
Moylan?
we'll call that a tentative yes.
Yeah. Very.
Director Moylan is absent. Director Yee is absent. Vice Chair Fredericks?
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel?
Aye.
Aye. President Parr?
Yes.
Present. The motion goes forward 5-0.
Well, 4-0, kinda a 5.
4.5.
Yeah, something like that.
Mr. Indecisive here. So.
No, I get it. Okay, then let's move on to item 12. We have the monthly review of Golden Gate Bridge traffic tolls and bus and ferry transit patronage fares. The staff report is on page 67. And Joe, you'll present this item along with item 13, please, and give us all the great news.
I'd be happy to do so. Thank you very much. If you could turn down 2 pages to page 69. On that first report, that is the very busy table because we are coming to the end of the fiscal year. We're in May. I generally would not be doing this right now. We wait until the end of June to do a lot of talking, but I think it's very important to notice. If you look in the box that's on the upper left-hand corner, that box represents bridge traffic, number of people crossing the bridge. The columns are there's 3 columns with numbers in them. Big million, million. Those bridge traffic actual 1920 is the 3rd column to the right in that table. You can see that in February we had a 1.5 million vehicles, and it went down to a little less than a million, so it dropped to 500,000. Then it dropped another 500,000 down to 500,000 vehicles, and then it went up to 770,000. That's the critical message we keep talking about over and over again. That just incredibly steep drop, and then now we're getting a slow rebound, and that's obviously the positive news and why we've asked you to change the recovery path going forward. That's positive. Now, if we take that same column and move down 1 box, that's in the middle box, which is bus stationers, people riding your bus. This is one to focus on. As you can see, it generally averages anywhere from 280,000 to 220,000 people a month. It's a lot of rides. And then in February, it went down to 230. In March, it went down to 123,000. In April, it went down to 31,000 people. So from where it should be around the 250 down to 31,000. And now it's up to 40,000. So it has grown a little bit. And that's really good. But it's still averaging about 85%. As Dennis mentioned, about 15% of normal is where it's sitting at. It's grown a little bit. It was 88 the month before. It's 15% in May. It's a little bit more now in June, but it's still very, very small. But very small is defined by ferry. If you look at ferry, if you drop down 1 more box, that same column, it was averaging anywhere from 250 to 220 to 250,000 a month, depending on the month in the early part of this fiscal year. And then it started to drop off in the winter, and then it really dropped off in COVID. Came in February, we had 176,000, March 63,000, April 1,700, and now we're up in May to 2,500. So it's a situation where, as it says, as you know, it's dropped almost at 1.99%, and then now it's up to about 98 and changed, almost 97% drop. It's almost 3% of growth. So these are the components that make up the loss in revenue. These are the major components that we're seeing. We are following these. They are been factored into your budget, and they will be factored into decisions that will be coming forward to you in the coming months. That's item 10. Sorry, not item 10, right? Yeah. Item 12. And then
yeah, this is item 12.
Oh. That's item 12. I can go on and just item 13 and 14.
Well, before you go to 13, yeah. I just had a quick question. I'm looking at the ferry numbers, which are just dismal, and so are the bus numbers. But I'm looking at the actual revenue for April. Help me with this, Joe. The actual revenue in April for ferry was, call it $31,000?
Yeah.
Okay. And then with 1,700 riders. And then in May, it was $18,000 with 2,500 riders?
The issue there is money being posted from past better months. So some of that money rolled in April, but there's no past month that was better when you get to May.
Okay, that explains it.
The timing in this world is not exactly perfect. It's pretty good, but it's not perfect.
So yeah, that explains it. I just saw the difference there and kind of was wondering what that was, but you've explained it. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, you know, April, May in both bus and ferry are just, you know, it's just catastrophic.
Yeah, people, and I think the important component here is, yes, there's an issue that I think several of you brought up in your questions and comments, that people are reluctant to ride on transit right now, and that I think there's some truth to that. But even more important for the district is that people don't have to go to the office.
Yep.
Their offices are not requiring them to do that, and the state and the state and local authorities are telling them not to do that. So as long as those messages are in play, their reluctance is like the third issue on the list. We you know, first the employer would have to the state would have to allow them to come, and the local authorities would have to allow them to go to work. Then the employer would have to ask them to come to work physically. Then they would have to deal with this reluctance of whether or not they're getting on the ferry, they're going to drive their car. Right now, since all three of the modes are way down, that means that they're not even being asked or required or allowed to go into the office. So if we don't see changes in those, behavior is important, and the region is doing a job of trying to advertise and get people the message out there that transit is safe. And around the world, it's proven that it actually is safe, comparatively speaking, to other modes. So but it's really the demand of the employer. So when you talk to your employer friends or you read things in the paper about employers, that's really where the critical key is going to be for us. Our employers demanding their employees come back, and we're not seeing that change.
Well, and that speaks to what I was referring to earlier in a paradigm switch. Wearing my other hat, the banking hat, we're hearing from commercial developers, commercial office people who lease office space, that they're now going through all sorts of budget projections and thinking around people working from home at a much greater rate, meaning that they don't have to, meaning that they will not have the leasing capability that they used to have. They will be perhaps left with a glut of office space. And all kinds of employers are making these decisions. That has a profound effect on on people crossing the bridge and on people taking, as you say, Joe, taking the bus and the ferry. So this is going to be an ongoing discussion, obviously. So so that's item 12. Did you want to say anything about item 13?
I think that we usually go over those each quarter. Clearly, the revenues are down, the expenses are a little bit down, so we are running a deficit at this point in the monthly tables. But I can take questions if there are any. Otherwise, we will address them fully in the July board meetings.
Great. Yep, good enough. So are there questions from the committee on items 12 or 13? Then hearing none, I'll ask the secretary if there are any people on the line from the public who'd like to weigh in on this.
All right, we're going to pull the public line now for items 12 and 13. We have no speakers for items 12 or 13.
And then on public comment in general, do we have anybody that wants to say anything about anything?
Yes, I believe there is a public commenter. I'm going to turn it over to Justine to handle that one. Hang on
Wonderful,
1 second.
thank you.
Off.
Good morning, Mr. Young. Would you like to go ahead and speak under public comment this morning? Barry Young.
I can't.
Go ahead. You can go ahead, Mr. Young.
Mr. Young, would you like to speak? Mr. Young?
Mr. Young, are you on the line? Would you like to speak this morning?
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Young.
There
you go. What would this is Brian Sobel. I'm chairing the committee. What would you like to say to the committee, please, this morning? Mr. Young, are you there? Mr. Young, if you're on mute, you may want to take mute off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
Mr.
call back in.
Okay, Mr. Young, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Oh, you can. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. I did have a talk on this thing, and I'm going to forego that because of the length of the meeting. I understand the budget constraints and everything else, and I just want to say that there's been a serious lack of communication to the drivers and such, and it's really left a bad taste in our mouths. I don't want to go into it. My letter covered it, and I'm sure it's written otherwise. But I just want to say that the district should really move on trying to get people back into the buses and, of course, into the ferries. Just a couple of notes that I've noticed over the last couple of months. So traffic is much lighter at certain locations and times of day than our schedule currently has taken part in the published scheduling. So consequently, their normal scheduled buses come in much earlier at scheduled stops, like Golden Gate Bridge, Toll Plaza, transit centers and malls, Park and Ride, R7, so on and so forth. If we work on the Golden Gate District is back in service again and continues, follow-up buses could be dispatched to pick up those passengers who may come for the regular schedule, but the online scheduled bus has already departed. The people who are in the bus, rather than wait for 15, 20 minutes or 30 minutes or more, they could be taken to their destinations on a much faster, timelier basis, and that makes sense with the lighter loads that we have in the buses mandated of 9 and 11 passengers. They'll be happy, and then the people who are there at the normal schedule time with a dispatched bus there, they can proceed on their trip. Sometimes when I get to the transit center, I can't take any more passengers, and I just have to wait. Nobody is happy that way. The other thing we could do on the commuter routes is to have buses picking up the regular commuter buses instead of in front of their homes and their normal streets at the Park and Ride. We do have some buses scheduled to come through, but if we had like the 76 come through at Petaluma bus lots, Park and Ride lots, people can go there because those lots aren't full. They can just drive there, and they'll have a bus waiting for them to take them in. And people learn the schedules and can count on buses being there if they get there at an odd time. They'll be happy. I have some other notes on this thing, but again, I want to shorten it. And we're all in this together. When the district cuts back routes, a lot of people just don't come back. I've experienced this before 15 years ago, and serving the restaurant workers out to Tiburon and so forth. They just don't come back. They carpool, or they have to get other jobs. They get fired. They can't meet the current assignments that they have. So I think we should do everything we can to get buses out there, and that people know that they're going to be there and on a timely basis.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Young, and thank you for your patience hanging on for throughout the meeting. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right. Then if we don't have any other public comments, then we've come to adjourning this very long meeting. I appreciate everybody's attention. This, as I said earlier, was going to be a heavy lift. So anyway, with that, Vice Chair Fredericks, may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. And Director Cochran, may I have a second?
Yes, you may. You're
Wonderful.
second.
Thank you, colleagues. And this concludes the meeting of the Finance Auditing Committee. The time is 11:56.